Divine Rise, Grand Rise, blessed be to your day. We understand that today is the only day that matters. You are the only one that matters. Everything outside of you is a reflection or an aspect of you for you to go through the experiences or the observations. The experiences are what the emotional aspect for us to understand the lesson, and the observation is for us to master the lesson. This week in the God Hour podcast, we got into assault and batteries. We got into the aspects of the victim complex or the supporter complex and supporting energy into a space. Like I use the examples. I use two top examples in the opening. I was like, you saying that your baby daddy ain't shit or your baby mama ain't shit, but now you got to access honesty with yourself, or that relationship, whatever it may be, went shit. You got to access and be honest with yourself. What did they accept of you for you to go into that space? Where were you at? Where was your pattern? What was your emotional aspect? I talked about it in many lectures. I can go back and look at every relationship, friendship, pattern, bond, you literally assessing everything and seeing where my access was. We got into that battery saver, 15% of the battery, it shuts things off. So that's the same way with your identity. Whenever you're in that emotional state, your emotional stamina, your emotional endurance and stamina, your spiritual stamina, your mental output, and you're getting stuck in that space, the amps and the ohms, a lot of the things as you start assessing the internal wounds and start doing that internal work, you're going to start upping your amps, or you're going to start upping your volume of how much power you can take in. And the things that you're going to try to cheat on, the cheat codes and things you try to use to go back to based on your old self are going to burn out. And those are also those emotional triggers. When you get upset, irritated, it's forcing you to see that cell in order for you to assess that cell. If it's a burnout cell, pour that shit out. And then we got into charged up. That's when we got into your spiritual stamina. That's where we got into the emotional and endurance and your mental output. Your credibility, but throughout the week we're going to build, and on Friday we're going to get into class. Throughout your life, I'm going to start with a story. I can go back, this time last year, I was starting my detox before I fasted. This year, I'm in the gym more, doing my gym alchemy, my detox and my workouts. The year before that, once again, I said I was in the middle of a detox before a fast. Release. Before that, I was in one of my extensive fasts. Before that, didn't have a place to stay. I was homeless. This is how we assess our all access to our emotional patterns. Every time around this year, I was in a state of release. Every time around this year, I was in a state of release. I was releasing from something. Something was being removed, whether I knew it or whether I accepted it or not. That's what gave me the clarity in my mental output. The all access pass. Y'all have heard it. I've been saying it before. If you're not familiar, in lectures, you come into this space, you only can receive you only going to receive without outside of yourself as deep as you went with inside of yourself. So if you're looking at your life and you're looking at your patterns, your habits, our behaviors, and you're noticing that they're causing a lot of conflicts now, especially with this Jupiter going into retrograde, making everything really, really dense, and you're noticing that the things you did before based in this space is now causing a lot of conflict in the external sense, or that aspects of the safety sense, is letting you know that emotional trigger, we have to understand these triggers, is triggering you to challenge your mental output, your why. What's your why? It's challenging you to challenge that mental output. It's challenging you to look at your emotional pattern, that comfort zone. Remember yesterday I talked about the aspect of that comfort zone. You coming out of that state of that comfort, the promiscuous thoughts based on feeling good and not accepting it going bad. It's just as bad as trying to avoid feeling bad. That's the aspects of your emotional, that's the aspects of our emotional endurance. Every time around this time, for me, one access to my pattern was I was in a state of detox. I was in a state of release. When we think about the summertime, summer solstice, when you're thinking about the summertime, it is a great time of release. It's a great time. It's a great time of release. It's hot. It's the heat. You're going to sweat. You're detoxing. Because if we look at everything being synonymous for during the fall and the winter, you're harvesting, you're harvesting, you're looking at what you're about to grow. Spring, everything comes into that bloom, and summer's a great time to release and show what you've been working on. The age of knowing is all about ownership. You've seen that over and over and over again. You know, last year, COVID happened. It really showed you what you were owning. You're looking at your patterns now. You're looking at what you were owning, and that is now about owning. It's about ownership. Everybody is at a different level of their ownership. That's what the ownership is in that to you and to me. My pattern of ownership is different than your pattern of ownership, but the underlying patterns and the methods that can be applied, or the formulas that can be applied, that's what we're learning. That's what we learn in that aspect of the collective. That's the collective learning aspect. So now ask yourself that question. What were you doing last year around this time? Now ask yourself the next question. Why were you doing that last year around this time? What was the significance of it? Did you learn the lesson in order to apply it to what you're doing now? This is when we start looking, peace and power. This is when we start looking at ourselves and taking in that self-assessment, because as you're doing your internal work, as we doing our internal work, everything around you is going to challenge. If it's time for something to be challenged, it's time for some self-reflection. It's time for that assessment. It's time for that evaluation. You have to allow everything's going to come up in your surface naturally. When we think about duality, everything down here is going to give you the lesson, and it's also going to give you the happy distraction. It's going to give you the door, and it's going to give you the tools to build that bridge. It's going to give you the door, then it's going to give you the tools to build that bridge. A lot of us, I remember for myself, like this, go back, and I'm thinking about my jobs, I'm thinking about my career, I'm thinking about all these aspects, relationships. A lot of them things, I was simply going through the doors. A lot of us just go through the doors. We go through the door that has that all access to that door. But understanding that door of all access, I've talked about that before. Every door that you're going to tap into is biometrically sound to you. It's biometrically locked and sound to you. No one else can go through that door. But when it comes time for us to build a bridge, the building aspect, the changing our frequency, we have to assess some of the things that you were doing that are now irritating you. That's a door you need to close off. So now it's time for you to sit there in that self-assessment. And now what are you really building? What are you tapping into? What are you working on? Where are you starting at? Everybody has a starting point. All that matters is that you start. I say that all that matters is that you start. If I never started in 2019, 2018, with my internal work and investing in doing the God hour, the God thoughts, doing the God thought videos, building into doing the podcast, and then learning more stuff about myself, and then understanding how that was a reflection of myself. Then I would go into now doing the classes on Friday nights, the Friday night lectures, to now providing therapy services, readings, and aspects of healing services. If I never started doing my internal work, if I did not start doing my internal shadow work and allowing things to dissipate and allowing things to fall away, I can't come into the space that I'm in. You can't come into this now. You can't come into this space of ownership. I've talked about it before. Every level that you go to, everything that you have not dealt with comes to the surface in that space. So now that we're in the age of knowing, the age of ownership, owning your name, LLC mentality. For a lot of you that did not do it back in the aspects of the I believe this and going back and forth, a lot of us are in that position where it's time to start owning these deep parts of our story. That's when you start understanding like this shit really becomes mental. This shit really becomes mental. And I didn't understand how mental it became until I had an example and I thought about it while I was at the gym working out. And I was like, and I talked about it in the podcast, most of my jobs were in restaurants, or even my first job was like I came into a certain space. So my first job, all my jobs were in restaurants. All my jobs pushed me into a leadership position earlier on once I got the game, once I understood the game. But when I got to that leadership position, that means, ooh, this is gonna be my career. This is gonna be my job. This is gonna be my career. I'm gonna own a restaurant one day and all of these aspects. Now, I'm saying that I still can't do that, but like this is where we're going into predestination. I did not understand that it was only fitting my emotional stamina. I mean, my spiritual stamina that was very, very low. My emotional endurance was very, very low, and my mental output was very, very low. I could tell that it was low. I can tell that it was low because when you go into that space, and we talked about that I talked about it before, you come into this space of neutrality. That's that space that we think is peace. We think we're in peace. We think that we're in peace. We think that's the land of peace. We're in that space of neutrality. You're only peace. You only can tap in based on to what you dealt with. You're only going to receive in your space, whether you're becoming it or you're reacting to it, whatever you have to deal with inside of your space. So now I'm looking at this job looking at these multiple jobs that I had, and I was going through the motions. Like, okay, cool, gotta go do schedules this day. I gotta go do the truck order this day. I gotta go, if I cut somebody off the line and now I gotta work their position. Here's the thing that keeps getting us stuck in this aspect of this example. When you're advancing, when you're going deep inside of yourself, we all talk about the hermit phase. Everything that comes up in that position behind you is meant based on the frequency or the volume or the ohms of the voltage that's needed to connect to that space. So when we're thinking about relationships, friendships, the job, you're simply not at that frequency anymore. It's because, and every time you try to go back over there, something burns out, the relationship gets worse, the friendship's getting irritating, or whatever it is. That trigger is letting you understand it's time to check the wattage. It's time to check the level of energy. It's time to check those emotional catalysts. Because a lot of times we get stuck in these emotional catalysts of the safety within that space, the irritation within that space. We get comfortable in that space. Remember, everything down here is to push you outside of comfort. So if you're finding comfort in something, 9 times out of 10, you're going to fall, that pattern is going to come up and it's going to hit you and it's going to make you really upset, really mad, make you feel some type of way because you're not supposed to be in comfort. Everything down here is based on grabbing what you need and leaving the rest. And as you're grabbing what you need and needing the rest, it exposes your attachments. It exposes what you're attached to. It exposes the things that you need to work on. Everything is being shown to you as it needs to be shown to you. You just have to look at it to yourself. Just like use this example right now, going into the aspects of your internal work. Until I realized why in all of my old jobs, why I could so rapidly get to a certain position and hold a manager position, hold a key position, and why I could get to it so fast. Until I assessed my emotional patterns, I couldn't understand the lesson of why I could get there so fast and nobody can take me out of that position and how I would lose the position. It's all because of my emotional pattern. It was all because of my emotional endurance. It was all based on my mental output. I was still acting in that old aspect of myself. So when my GM or my managing partner or my overhead, my supervisor would come to me and ask me the question and be like, hey, tell them they got to stay till this, tell them to go do this, this, and this. And then when I go tell them that, and then they feel some type of way about me saying it to them, it was multitudes of lessons inside of that space. Multitudes of lessons inside of that space. One of the multitude of lessons inside of that space was, I remember one time, and we've all had to tell somebody what to do. I remember I had to cut somebody off the line. Yo, go ahead and do your cleaning work and you can get out of here. Man, I just got here. Man, that's fucked up, man. They cut me and all this, right? You telling me I can't fucking work? I was like, no. What I'm telling you is, start doing your cleaning work, your early outs, and then gauging on what the fuck's about to happen in the space, then we'll judge from there. But go do your early outs. I had to understand, first lesson in that space was me accepting my space of authority and learning how to respond, learning how to inform, manifest a generator. The second aspect was them coming at me that way or feeling something about authority. This guy, that chick, whoever, I had to understand that they're looking at me they have an authority problem wound. They have problems with authority. Therefore, somebody in their life earlier on, and this is just going back into it after I thought about it today, they have father issues. They're not used to authority. Where does that come from? Now that I understand, and now that I understand, I'm hearing to respond. Now I can inform based on nurturing that space. Everything outside of you is a lesson in order for you to master, to go forward. The first time that it ever happened to me, motherfucker got mad. I got mad. I was like, yo, just leave. And then I found myself online. Cooking through rushes, trying to get everything online. And it felt good because it got my urge going, because it felt good because I still said, yeah, I still got it. Y'all wish y'all could be like me. I was still in that ego state. My inner child was getting attention. My inner child was getting that attention inside of that space. So of course it was easy for my inner child getting charged up. What cells are being charged? And that's what we got into in the podcast. What cell was being charged? My avoidant wound, my acceptance wounds, these internal wounds were being charged. A lot of times we come into these spaces, and the reason that we stay there for so long, or we stay in that space, is because it charges the baseline aspects of us. Remember, everything inside of your space is only based on where you're at. The level of access that you have, this is when you ever hear this motherfuckers, when we're talking about downloads, you're only going to be able to download it based on your level of information of what you need to do next. How I take in information is going to be entirely 180 how you're going to take in the information based on where you're at. Based on what you need to do. This is when we have to start understanding when you're looking for the aha moment. Most of the times when it comes to this, and we're going to get deep into this on Friday, most of the times we look for the charge based on our urge and on the wound. We look for that emotional tag. We look for that behavioral marker for us to respond or react a certain way, and we're not taking into assessment. That goes into the aspects of the conversations that you're not only having with yourself. Remember, every conversation that you're having with yourself is based on what you're listening to about yourself. So now when you go into the space, you're looking for something to connect to that aspect in order for you to stay within that space of comfort. So now you created your entire framework of your space is based on that level of comfort, that mental output. You got used to saying that something was stopping you, something was shutting you down, something's oppressing you. I got to survive. So now everything in your space matches that level. You only have access to things based on survival. Your emotional stamina will start burning out based on that level of that survival. Because you only can go so far. But now when things come into your space that challenge your survival mode, that shuts you down, that challenge that survival mode, or that excuse, or that wound, now it's challenging you so you can work on your emotional endurance. It's something similar that I used to do when I was personal training at the gym. I was like, whatever everybody do physically, I would give my clients, and I'm still doing the same thing. I've always been, as I told you, you're always going to be still doing the same shit. But as I told my clients, it's like whatever I give you in the physical form, like what I work out, I'm going to give you something also. It's upon you, or if you need something based on a mental output or a mental input to match the frequency of what you're putting out physically, to challenge your emotional aspect. That way, when you start tapping in now when you go do your workout, you're not doing it based on the emotion. You're challenging your emotional endurances. That way, you're not stuck in that emotional aspect. I worked out when I was mad. I was looking real cut when I was mad, but then you're no longer mad, so you no longer work out. You're no longer upset. You're no longer sad. You're no longer depressed. So you no longer do the work that you need to do. That's that comfort. That's that emotional stand. That's that emotional endurance. Your emotional endurance and your mental output are they're meant to be challenged. So now, time to go look back at every relationship you was in and what lesson did you learn? I don't care if you was in 10 relationships and all 10 of them motherfuckers cheated on you. They all taught you something. Baseline, they told you that you were cheating on yourself. Baseline, they were telling you were cheating on yourself somehow. Baseline, they weren't emotionally unavailable. They were emotionally unavailable to me in every relationship. They were all emotionally unavailable. Were they really emotionally unavailable, or do you not have emotional intelligence? This is one of those things, I was thinking about it earlier. I was like, we got to get out of this habit of staying in the lower of the human realm of shit and being like, men aren't emotional and women are over emotional creatures. You are not human. You have a masculine and a feminine receptive aspect within you. So that's why, yes, whenever you do get emotional, as a man and you get emotional, it's a natural part of the process. We've been given this same narrative to shut that shit off and not deal with it. So now with the women in that same aspect, you that switching, niggas, you supposed to understand your emotions. That women are emotional. That's an excuse. It's a cop-out. Men ain't supposed to show emotion. You know it's a cop-out. You know when you start doing the internal work, it's a cop-out. You have the lesson plan in front of you of why that was a cop-out. You seen what being you had the exact example of what emotional attachment does. You had the example. That's what you came down here for your contract. You know what it was. On Friday, I want to throw this out there now. On Friday, we're going to get into the synonymous aspects of your soul contract, the 7 seals, the 7 chakras, and all that good stuff. Some of y'all are still acting in that root chakra. You haven't busted that seal open. You're still accepting the charges from the lower aspect. You're still only reacting. You don't know how to respond to the physical aspect. That's why whenever you start doing your work, that emotional stamina, the emotional endurance that you would occur to deal with it or to avoid it naturally, that's why you always go back to your go-to. There's no more go-tos. This is not rent to own anymore. This is about ownership. This is not rent to own anymore. This shit's about ownership. What are you owning? First, you got to own your story. First, you got to own your story. First, you got to own that darkness. First, you got to start owning those aspects. Because you're going to notice that the deeper that you go within yourself, the more creative you become. The less you go into yourself, when it comes to the points of creation, that's when you get those writer's blocks. That's when you get that creativity block. Because you're not going deep. It's something that's being blocking it. It's time to assess those blockages. It don't matter what ritual you do. And I said this in the podcast. It don't matter what rituals, what candles, whatever you sit there and try to do. In the external aspect, it's only going to bring up what needs to be done next. You talking about you did a money ritual and you got even if you got the 100 and you got $100,000 in your account, your baby father, your baby mother still ain't shit. You still owe people some money and all of that good shit. People still borrowing from you. It don't matter how many times you want to do that ritual. Until you do what you need to do, when it comes up, you only going to keep repeating that same thing. That's like taking the aspect of the dead laying with the dead, and they would be stuck on his tax time and stimulus checks. That's the same thing, you doing when you're not doing the internal work. That's the same shit you doing up here in the spiritual aspect. You went from stimmy checks and tax refunds to money rituals and money jars. You went from being charged off by sex and making babies to now you over here in the spiritual aspect talking about I'm celibate and I'm shutting some shit down because I'm not trying to create anything that's not deserving. You have to assess yourself. That's why it keeps happening. That's why it's going to keep cycling back through. It don't matter what you did during retrograde. It don't matter until you understand what the fuck happened during retrograde. It don't matter what happened to you during this Jupiter retro coming through now. What are you doing to assess it? It's time to get into that darkness with yourself. It's time to assess what you've been charging up. Once again, in the Guide Hour podcast, that's what we got into this week, assault and batteries. You want to look at everything. You're talking about, I was in a narcissistic relationship for 12 years. Repeat the process. It's going to continuously repeat itself until you have had assessed and learned that lesson. The key to going into this repeat process, because it's not saying, and I hate because that love and light answer, it's not saying that the things will not repeat and if you manage it and you do it, that it won't repeat itself. The repetition is a natural aspect of in the duality. So you might have the same thing pop up 26 times. That means you got either 26 lessons or you got one lesson that is the underline to master all of those lessons. But until you accept that shit's gonna repeat until you, and not look at it as bad, but look at it as positive or negative, and what is it removing, you gonna sit there and be like, man, I don't want that shit to repeat. I don't want that shit to happen again. You know how many lessons I repeated over and over and over again through every relationship that I was in? Same damn lesson. I had 18 lessons in four relationships with like an 18 point lesson plan. But they had it until I started doing the work, I couldn't get to the underlying cause. I couldn't get to the pattern. This is the internal work. This is that shadow work, that internal work. Keep digging at that shit. You be like, man, yeah, but the only thing is, you looking at it like, nigga, I made it. I did it. Look what fell away. Stop looking at everything that's falling away in the physical. I told you, like, this time last year, I was in the middle of a detox. The year before that, I was in the middle of a fast. The year before that, I was homeless. Didn't have no place to stay. What was the underlying lesson? It's time for me to release. It's time for me to invest in that detox. It's time for me to invest in something based on challenging my emotional endurance, my mental output, my spiritual stamina. Y'all know all the time, I stay in the ethers. I stay in the ether, bringing this down all the time. That keeps you in that. Remember, because as I've said that before, your integrity and your humility are found in your darkness. Your integrity and your humility are found in your darkness. I said it yesterday. When you were in your darkest moments, your integrity was challenged in order for you to survive. So if you find yourself in those dark moments and it keeps triggering your survival, it's time to assess what you rooted in based on survival. Everything got the lesson for you. Everything's here to charge you up and bring you to the next level. You've always been in the correct position. What you about to do with it? But yeah, the God Hour Podcast. This week's episode, we got into assault and batteries. It's all over my page. I just sent out a bunch of links and all that good stuff. Tune in to tap out. Tune in to tune up. What you gonna do with it? Everything from readings, setting up that consultation, to everybody that's done there. Everybody that has a consultation has done a reading last week. You'll be getting your emails this week and the plans on us moving forward. But if you're ready to go in, you ready to go in and tap in and get deep into yourself, and you tired of getting stopped? Just sit with it. You got it. Just sit with it. That's the best thing when we get into our information with ourselves. Like, just sit with it. The moment that you think that you have something, allow yourself to sit with it. That's another lesson about stilling yourself. Allow yourself to sit with it. But everything from the guided meditations, consultation for that shadow work consultation, readings, all my readings are mini consults. When you ready, let's get into it. I want you to be fucking great. I want you to become the best version of yourself. But it's going to take you being real honest. It's going to take you being real open, getting real vulnerable. I forgot the name of my man that was doing the sketch. Now he got the podcast show. He was like, yo, you got to basically be like a stripper when it comes to your vulnerability. You get paid the most. The stripper gets paid the most when they naked. Use that aspect when you're looking at your vulnerability. You only going to get the most out of you only going to get the most out of the space when you're vulnerable and you're allowing yourself to feel everything. Be like the stripper. Be naked. Get naked with yourself. Get naked with yourself. Get naked with yourself. You trying to make everybody accept you based on you got certain articles of clothing on. Get naked with yourself. I guarantee it changes everything. But yeah, I want you to be the fucking best. I desire you to be the fucking best. I'm going to be sitting here working on got some work I got to do. You got some work you got to do. If it resonates, share. You ready for that work? Hit me in the inbox. And be the fucking best. I love you. We love us. Ashe.